We are pleased to announce that our next guest on the Omega podcast is David Rosenstein, a representative from the leading professional networking platform, LinkedIn. In this episode, he will join our founder for a discussion centered on building an effective sales engine, implementing human-centric strategies to attract and retain clients, nurturing a passion for leadership in sales, and discovering innovative approaches to engage potential customers in the future.
Welcome to the Omega Podcast with David Rosenstein, Senior Account Executive for Talent and Learning for Mid-Market Companies at LinkedIn Incorporated. It is such a pleasure to have you on the Omega Podcast, David.
Enan, it is such a pleasure to be here and always a pleasure to get to chat with you. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I am super excited about our conversation today as we lay the groundwork for companies, business owners, senior executives that are looking to enhance their approach to sales as well as marketing. I know from your recent role with LinkedIn, you've had incredible exposure to top-tier companies, mid-market companies specifically. But before we can unravel all of the complexities and opportunities in this field, can you share with our audience how you sort of came into this role in sales?
Yeah, I definitely should have read the writing on the wall that I was destined to be in sales. So I was growing up and I was a professional magician. I fell into magic professionally because when I was 3 years old, a magician came to my birthday party. And I remember when he popped the balloon and a rabbit appeared, I looked at him and I said, I want to do that when I grow up. And I did. And I did that all throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. Local moms would hire me out for their kids' birthday parties. And I realized, though, going into college, I had a lot of my friends who weren't pursuing college. They were doing magic full time. And I realized that wasn't the area for me. But I realized the thing that was the closest thing to performing on stage at scale was marketing. And so I thought that that would be the world that I'd break into. I studied marketing really significantly. I took a lot of marketing courses, became president of the marketing club at the University of Maryland. And at every turn, professors, bosses, every single person would say, David, I feel like you should look into sales. And I always thought, no, sales is slimy. Sales is for sleazy car salespeople. And I don't want to do that. And it wasn't until junior year that I was like, you know what? Fine. There's only one brand that excites me enough that if I could sell anything, I could sell that. So let me try doing sales at LinkedIn. And if I love it, then I'll pursue it. But if I hate it, I'll never have to do it again. And I have been at LinkedIn now 6 years off and on. And I couldn't think about doing anything else. Transparently, the best part about sales for me is getting to feel like I'm on stage, quote unquote, every single day in this job and getting to perform. But instead of doing magic, it's getting to represent a brand that I'm excited to energize other people about. So it's been a blast being here.
Wow. Well, talk about abracadabra. You definitely got us to a place, especially with your success at LinkedIn, just working with those mid-market companies and providing the resources and the different products that LinkedIn has to their constituents ultimately. But when it comes to your sales pitch, I know that's definitely the first step in making sure companies are able to get themselves in the door. What particular advice do you give to an entrepreneur, a business owner, or maybe even a mid-market company that's looking to appeal to prospective clients? I mean, what would you say is your top 3 priorities in a sales pitch? Because you definitely have it, and not in a, inhumane way. I think you do it in such a genuine way. But what are some of those components that people should be mindful about?
Yeah, if I had to boil it down to the 3 elements of a really, really successful pitch, here's what I'd say. Number 1, people don't necessarily chase benefits. They run away from obstacles and pain. So make sure as you're sharing what it is that you do, I could very easily say the benefit as LinkedIn is you get access to 1 billion hiring 1 billion folks in your network in a second. You can access the entire global professional network in seconds. So you can fill roles in about a quarter of the amount of time. But how much better is it to say, instead of roles sitting open for 4 to 5 months and your business losing revenue, how much more effective would it be if you could take complete ownership over your hiring process and not wait for the right person to come in? So that's number 1. Number 2, always using really plain speak English term. Every time I talk with someone, it kind of sounds like I'm using 4th grade language. And 1, that's just because I'm not very bright and I don't have a sophisticated vocabulary. But I think number 2, people resonate with humans. So I hear folks all the time talking about how we're leveraging artificial intelligence to streamline recruiters' day-to-day productivities. But isn't it so much easier to say, hey, how incredible is it that now, instead of needing to spend hours and hours writing personalized message to candidates, you could write 25 messages to candidates in 3 seconds without having to lift a finger. That's a way more effective talk track. The last thing that I'd say is always leaning on them first, right? Not everyone has a problem which you can solve. And so one thing that I'll always ask is, I always start off calls, and I've been on the receiving end of founders pitching their businesses and their products, sharing, hey, here's what we do, here's what it looks like, look at how cool this is. But very rarely do they dig in and say, sure, it seems like, is this an issue for you? Is this actually a challenge you're running into? Okay, it sounds like it's a challenge you're running into, but is it an important challenge? Like, do you care about solving it? Why do you care about solving it? I mean, it sounds like you care about solving it, but like, are you willing to allocate resources towards it? Time, money, like how big of an issue is it actually? Those kinds of questions really help you get to the heart of, is this actually something that is worth spending more time into? So in short, in summary, number one, don't chase benefits, run away from pain. Number two, talk like a human, use fourth grade language in the way you speak. And number three, most importantly, ask about them, make it about them, align with their pain. Don't try and create something that might not be there.
Perfect. And I love how you just solidified those 3 points. And I know for our listeners, they can share about, from my exposure and my experience, about the pains of dealing with clients and realizing, oh, we didn't get that deal, we didn't get that sales opportunity. But I think it oftentimes goes back to when we first start the process in prospecting. What particular qualities do you look for in prospecting new business or new deals?
Yeah, I think it's so easy with the information overload that we have nowadays to just get completely overwhelmed. So I'll tell you, for me personally, so what I sell every single day is I sell the tools that small businesses and growing companies can use so that they don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on job boards, or they don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on headhunters. Those are the kinds of services that we sell at LinkedIn to the small businesses. And so one of the things that I always look for when I'm prospecting are key signals. Number one, when a new person joins the company that maybe has used our product before, if someone comes from a headhunting firm that every single one of their recruiters is using LinkedIn, hello, one of the things I'm going to reach out to them and say, hey, I know you come from a headhunting background. You're probably thinking, I know I'm just a one-person recruiting show, but you're probably wishing you had access to the same candidates that you used to. So would it make sense to chat? Number two, another signal that I use is, are there open roles on their sites? And so I'm always looking for companies that are hiring. Number three, what I'm also doing is I'm trying to see, sure, they're hiring, but how long have these roles been open for? Or is their CEO or COO actively sharing and posting these jobs? So for me, I'm all about intent-based signals, and I use Sales Navigator a lot, really heavily to find those, getting notifications to my email every time someone new joins a company, every time someone posts on LinkedIn, especially in HR. So it's really exciting, but now through the mountain of data, through Clay, through Sales Navigator, through Apollo, through ZoomInfo, there's so many ways to surface insights, so you don't have to spend hours and hours sifting, trying to find the right person.
Yeah, and that definitely takes a while, especially going through all of those databases to just kind of validate whether or not the prospect that you're going to approach or email, or maybe even do a cold call, is going to be available, that they're accessible, and if they're going to be responsive in what you're sharing and or selling. But oftentimes what sales comes down to is developing trust. I know trust and transparency is a key word, but it's more of something that develops a cadence that needs to take place over a period of time. And many business owners, entrepreneurs, when starting out and when they get to that closed door, they sometimes get closed off and say, oh, that opportunity will never open up. But sometimes it just is very simple, and there is no trust, there's no transparency, there's no cadence that's developed in order for that person to kind of come into the room and say yes to them. What would you sort of share with prospective entrepreneurs, individuals that have received those closed doors, and kind of encouraging them to say, hey, keep going, especially when it comes to developing that cadence? Because I've talked to business owners that have said to me explicitly, Keenan, I have been reaching out to this said client for 5 years now, and they've just said yes. Just imagine 5 years of consistency and reaching out and being able to actually get that success story. But many people don't have that tenacity. How can they work on that?
So I think, first of all, it takes a million tries, oftentimes in this information economy, to get a hold of someone. One of the things that we notice now more than ever on the data side is that that inboxes are crowded more than ever before. So in terms of getting a hold of the right people, using more challenging channels or maybe the lesser used channels is a more effective way to get a hold of someone. Inboxes are now more crowded, so lean more heavily on cold calls. I will say something else that always will make someone resonate and spark a reply with you is to be able to articulate, and this is really good advice from one of my mentors and sales coaches, Chris Orlob. He gives this incredible advice of be able to articulate a prospect's challenges more effectively than they can. I'll give you an example of a time someone did this for me really recently. I was interviewing for a job, and the job would have been a perfect pathway into me becoming a sales consultant, which is something I want to do down the line. I want to coach companies. I want to coach sales leaders on how to most effectively build their go-to-market engine. And at one point, I had this job offer, and he asked me, this sales leader, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do down the line? And I shared, I want to be a sales consultant. And he told me, he said, David, I notice you're hesitant about this job. And I think it's not that you're hesitant about accepting this job itself, but I think you're unsure whether or not that career path is actually the thing that you have in mind. I don't know if you feel confident in your goal setting abilities and the goals that you have currently planned out for yourself. And I was blown away because the way that this guy was able to articulate exactly how I was feeling really, really captivated me and really made me lean in and feel like he built trust. So one of the things you can do all the time is, let's say for me personally, if I'm talking to a construction company, and construction companies are oftentimes struggling, especially in this market now, they're struggling to find superintendents and great project managers, especially more in the mid-senior when they're looking to cherry pick exactly who you're looking for. One of the things that's really helpful is when someone says, it's just been tough to hire, being able to say, yeah, I've chatted with other smaller construction companies, and one of the things they're noticing is they're posting a job and getting hundreds of resumes. They've spent hours and hours finding a needle in a haystack just to find only a few needles that are even barely qualified for it. Is that the same issue you're running into? And notice I did a few things here. Number one, I said, hey, when I talk with other similar sized construction companies, I use their example and I lean on familiarity. I say, hey, I've done this before. And whenever I do this, number two, I'm able to extrapolate this trend. And number three, they give me a little bit. I share this is what's happening in my world, but then I leave it open-ended to them. I was like, that's what some of my clients are running into. To what extent is that resonating with you? And I open the door for them to correct me. So I always want to make sure I'm building that trust by letting them know they're talking to someone who is an expert in their specific world. They may be the expert on their industry and their company, but I'm the expert on that specific person's hiring challenges. And I want them to know that immediately.
I love how you leave space for that feedback. We talk about that feedback loop because it takes two to tango. Absolutely. And sometimes if you kind of try to lead the conversation, the outcome is not going to be in your favor because ultimately sales is more of a way, I believe, as a service to another. It's like, hey, I have a solution to your most critical problem, what I believe to be a solution to your problem. What is it that I can do to curate a solution with you? That way we can be able to collaborate on that. And I think that's so crucial. But when it comes to the KPIs used to address sales challenges, or maybe even to measure sales success, what would you say are the benchmarks for those types of KPIs that people should be mindful about to know that they're even moving in a positive direction or maybe in a more negative direction?
Yeah. There's a couple key metrics that whenever I'm advising like small businesses, definitely to keep in mind for when they're building up their engine. Number one is to understand within their sales funnel, what are the percentages of folks that they're chatting with that are actively moving to stage 2, where it's either a demonstration, like a tour of the technology. And out of those, what is the percentage of those opportunities that are actually converting? If you're noticing a really low drop-off rate of after you share how your partnership would work, how your solution would work, how much it would cost, if you're noticing really big drop-off, you might not be disqualifying people enough early on in the first process. You might be pushing people through the funnel and wasting time talking to people that are never going to work. And so one thing that I always try and do, and this is a tip from another sales mentor who I deeply advise, Moore Asseline, is this idea of kind of like unselling and kind of being skeptical. So when someone shares, hey, we would love to be able to digitalize our accounting, paperwork, and bookkeeping. Sure, that might be on their priority list, but it might not be enough worth spending time for and spending resources and money. So maybe asking like, hey, sure, it sounds like that's something that you want to do. Can I ask like what's so important about that? What else is competing for your attention? How high is this on your priority list? So number one, most importantly, understanding and being able to disqualify people early on is going to be key for saving time. So you're not chasing leads that are never going to buy from you in the short term. I think that's number one. The other piece that I would share is to what extent do you feel like when you are chatting with clients that they are nodding, that they're being enthusiastic and that they're resonating with you, as well as referrals. So once you have an existing business, it's hard enough to get one client, but once you have someone who can advocate for you, that can open up doors to other people, if they're not comfortable enough to refer you, then that might be speaking to the quality of work that you're delivering or their client satisfaction. So I would say those are probably in a sales engine, the two metrics that I would zone in on first and foremost.
Enjoying this episode of the Omega Podcast? We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts or feedback in the comments. You can also visit omegaconsulting.online for more resources, insights, and industry updates. Let's get back to this executive conversation.
That's perfect. And I think I'm really grateful that you've highlighted those sales engines and making sure that you're reviewing that to make sure that you're getting the most effective outcome for your business. But just to kind of shift gears in our conversation a little bit, I know we can talk more extensively about sales, but I think many people listening to our podcast may not know about you, David, and how you have come to be a top tier sales executive at LinkedIn. In short, can you provide our listeners with kind of a snapshot of how you got to where you are today? Obviously, you're extremely successful in your career. You are a trailblazer. You're an energizer. Every single time I've been in the room with you has just been such a joy. And I remember back to when we met actually at a LinkedIn event when we were in college, the amazing speech and just how well you were able to handle a massive size of a room of 100 plus people, and just your way of just communicating just really stood out to me. But I can go on and continue to praise you, but can you kind of shed light on that?
Well, first of all, you're so sweet. That was definitely like one of the highlights of college. And for listeners, Keenan and I met at an event that was sponsored by LinkedIn, and it was hosted for students. And they did these events called Accelerate You. They were in densely metropolitan areas, so they wouldn't spend all these resources going to any one university. They didn't believe just because you went to a certain university, you were more or less qualified. So they'd go to these metropolitan hubs where they could attract hundreds and hundreds of students nearby, share with them the LinkedIn brand, and get people to drink the Kool-Aid. And boy, oh boy, did I get that Kool-Aid. I applied to so many jobs that summer and got rejected from all of them. Then the next summer I persevered. But it was really, really fun getting to present in that room. And I'll tell you a few things that have kind of helped me succeed since being here at LinkedIn. Number one, as a seller, it's incredibly easy to copy the top performers and emulate the folks that you aspire to be. I didn't want to be like LinkedIn's top performers. I wanted to be a world-class seller. Independent of selling LinkedIn, I wanted to have incredibly refined sales chops. And so I looked outside for my skill building. Tip number one, if you're only relying on the sales enablement that your company is providing, you are missing probably 90% of the best kinds of sales training offered. Keep in mind, some sales coaches are incredible and phenomenal. I just know for me, there was a really large delta between where I wanted to be and where I'd get if I only looked internally. I was hearing the same advice circulated again and again. And so that was number one. I took a lot of sales courses. I actively sought out mentors, devoured LinkedIn content, read a bunch of sales books, whether gap selling, Never Split the Difference, Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. So many different, I was kind of foaming at the mouth, just like hunting after new skills. And I think that really helped. Number two, I was really, really quick to lean into data and pivot. So I was able to immediately pivot when I saw, as I used to sell to small businesses, and I saw, hey, what used to work for me is no longer working for the larger companies now that I'm working with, where there's larger deal cycles. You have to be thinking 6 to 9 months out more strategically, where before I could just churn and burn with some clients. And so I think that's been a second thing, is looking into the data and seeing, okay, when I'm not doing well, why am I not doing well? What are the best people doing, and how can I pivot as needed? And I think number three, the best thing that I try and do is I try and build up the people I work with. And so when you chat with someone in a company, oftentimes they are your point person, and they can either be your gatekeeper or they can be your champion. They can either protect the time of their executives, or you can get them so fired up about your product and brand that they can't wait to introduce you to their executives. And I think one of the things I've done a really good job of by taking some of the advice advice of my mentor, Sam McKenna, is really teaching people how to buy. When someone really wants to get my service up and running, I do a really, really effective job of basically sharing, hey, you are the expert of your own company. You know your executives better than I do. You know your internal company better than I do. My expertise is working with fired up people like you and mobilizing and getting LinkedIn approved through the hoops and hurdles. So we're going to have to tag team to get this approved, but do you mind if I make a few recommendations to increase the likelihood that you get the contract moved across the line? And so being able to be on the same side of the table when we negotiate has been incredibly effective. So multi-threading, upskilling, as well as leaning into data. I will tell you, I had over this past year, I missed my first quarter in my life, which is actually fine now because my new job I measured on the half. So the quarter was kind of just like a soft target. And so it's kind of making sure that when I'm celebrating the highs, when I'm going to Bora Bora for being like a top 1% seller at LinkedIn, I'm definitely enjoying that while also making sure I'm not getting cocky or complacent. And also making sure that I realize, hey, what got me here isn't going to get me there. So pivoting skills, having someone keep me accountable on the outside, and having a manager that's been incredibly transparent and direct with me have all been really key recipes to my success.
I really appreciate you mentioning, David, the importance of your mentors, the individuals around you kind of supporting you throughout your process. And I know team dynamic is extremely crucial, especially to the success of individuals who are in sales. But how do you plan to leverage your experience to contribute to your sales team's success?
This is actually a huge differentiator, I think, between top sellers and the people that everyone wants to work with. So I wrote a post last week that kind of resonated with a lot of people. And this might be a hot take, I don't know, but I think the number one performer, someone who's at 200% of their quota, is not as great as a talent multiplier. Someone who might be at 150% of their quota, but is sharing, is upskilling others around. I believe that gatekeeping is hate keeping. I believe that protecting and keeping what's getting you so successful close to your chest, there is nothing that gets me more frustrated at all when I chat with a top performer, someone who's murdering it. And I ask, hey, what are you doing that's so great? And they either A, are giving me like, oh, you just got to work harder. Or B, they're giving me advice that's not really actionable. So they're telling, oh, it's really important to pitch big. Okay, how? How do you do that? Would you rather listen to the advice of someone who says pitch big versus, hey, when you do deliver pricing, it's really important to use a down tone at the end of what you're sharing so you don't sound nervous. So being able to say our solution costs because of everything you said, we can save you $1.5 million a year, and it only comes out to around $60,000 per year. It's much more effective than someone saying, yeah, it's $60,000. What do you think about that? Filling the space. And that level of tact and specificity is the kind of training that I try and lead. So one of the things that I often do to try and upskill others is, number one, every time a new person comes on my team, I beg my manager if I can onboard them. I want to be a manager one day. And so I'm trying to flex those skills now of coaching. And gosh, it's tough to coach other people, in salespeople especially, because I just want to replicate and make carbon copies of David, but I know that's not the most effective way to make everyone succeed. I can't put a square peg in a round hole. So number one, I ask my manager to upskill others. Number two, I'll lead trainings for the organization. Last week I saw there was a cold call training, and I run cold call trainings for another media company for their sellers. And so I messaged my manager's manager to say, hey, I actually have a lot of cold calling skills and training knowledge that I'm happy to share and lead a presentation if you'd like me to just jump in or tag team. And to which I got a response of, you know what, David, actually, let's leave an entire session like just for you. And so kind of like volunteering this knowledge and being able to scale. Number three, the last thing is I also make my knowledge really publicly known internally and externally. I'm constantly sharing in Slack, constantly posting on LinkedIn. When I learn something from other people, I will always try and recycle and share that. And so some people think of it as like stealing content, but when you give credit where credit is due, which I've tried to do a few times throughout this podcast, people typically benefit and you end up being like a connector of knowledge, which in my mind, that's all I want to be. I'm just a huge sales nerd. And if I can get other people more knowledge that I've kind of synthesized a little bit, there's nothing that gets me more fired up. So it's a real privilege getting to make others around me better.
That's so well said. And I just really appreciate your demeanor when it comes to connecting other people. Obviously, that's LinkedIn's entire business model is connecting other people. So I don't know if we're going to have a full circle moment where you might get some brownie points there. So if any LinkedIn representatives are out there, definitely ping David because he's definitely a great representative. But
I will never turn down a raise if any LinkedIn executives are listening.
Well, you're definitely having one on the way. But one thing that you mentioned, David, that I really appreciate is your initiative to take on more. And many times people in specific roles, even entrepreneurs, startup founders, they, again, get complacent. They said, hey, we're at a market cap of $1 million in yearly revenue. I'm doing great. I got my boat. I'm flying to Bora Bora. I have a house in Maui. Everything's great. But then you become complacent and then things start to change, especially with all of these market trends and all of these industry standards, especially when it comes to AI governance and how the market is shifting so rapidly. I mean, in your role, especially in sales, what particular resources or, in this instance, market trends are you keeping a close eye on to stay abreast, especially when it comes to AI? Is AI impacting your role? Is it enhancing your role? Is it in a way removing specific people from your team because of some of those repetitive tasks? Can you kind of give us like an ecosystem overview of what's kind of taking place right now?
Yeah, I'll share how LinkedIn is affecting me personally, how it's affecting the kinds of people I support, and then how, fortunately, LinkedIn has been really ahead of the game in terms of making sure that we're aligning with this shift rather than falling behind. So for me personally, I mean, I've noticed since with the wave of AI, we are constantly being asked to do more with less. Quotas are being raised, our sales targets are moving in a higher direction. And so I'm constantly being asked, hey, David, how can you do more when you still only have 8 to 9 hours in a day? And so obviously, if you want to hit higher sales targets, you could just work 50, 60, 70-hour weeks, but that might not be super sustainable. There are some founders on who are working 100, 120-hour weeks who are like, oh, I would love to work an 80-hour week. But for a lot of sales folks, especially, that can lead to really, really high burnout. For me personally, one of the things I'm doing is I'm automating a lot of my repetitive admin tasks that have historically taken up a lot of time, whether that's automatically generating proposals, whether or not that's writing email summaries, whether or not that's summarizing calls, whether or not that's brushing me up on information from a client I had 3 weeks ago without needing to spend hours and hours rewatching videos, being able to in one click push my Gong AI recap summary and have everything that I need to know in 30 seconds. With my clients, it's been really hard for companies that are especially noticing that they don't need full-time recruiters anymore. A lot of people are trying to augment their recruiting teams specifically. And so it's kind of challenging to sell recruiting tools to companies that maybe feel they don't need as many HR work leaders. And so one of the things that we've been able to do at LinkedIn, which is incredible, is our tools have been rolling out the most incredibly challenging. They've been able to solve the most incredibly challenging problems that recruiters will face. So, fast forward a few weeks ago, or even a few years ago, if you wanted to write messages to a lot of candidates, or even if you wanted to find really specific people, let's say you were looking for an engineer in DC who had government clearance experience, you need to know how to create incredibly sophisticated Boolean search strings and toggle all the right filters to find that small handful of candidates that are open to work. Now you can use AI to kind of open-endedly prompt, hey, here's what I'm kind of looking for. And in 30 seconds, have the tool kind of work for you in the background. Now we're incorporating new agentic technology, which is going to be rolling out over the next few months and years, which I'm incredibly excited to see how LinkedIn not only helps your recruiters, but also LinkedIn can kind of become that trusted advisor to help your hiring managers, your recruiting team kind of 10x their output. So I'm really excited to see how it's impacting the clients, as well as how companies that are changing their recruiting teams, their team structures, their roles of responsibilities. It's really exciting to get to work with companies that are going through these transformations and getting to be a more consultant and dedicated thought leader in the space. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an exhilarating experience. Just being able to see agentic solutions coming into fruition and how more and more companies are adopting some of these AI modules. But I love the fact that companies are willing to take risk, especially now in this day and age where a lot of companies are reducing their costs and kind of taking a step back from expensing themselves when it comes to technological expenses. But when it comes to some forecasting that we can kind of highlight, I mean, where do you see sales in the next 5 to 10 years? What particular trends or maybe what particular areas would you like to have implemented to really improve the sales pipeline or maybe sales cycle?
I think a few things that are going to become more important. So number one, active listening and humans' abilities to build rapport, make people feel understood. That is going to become more and more important and more scarce. I think folks that are going to, I think a big trend is going to be a lot of sellers continuing to use, leverage, lean on AI, lean on automation, on personalization at scale technologies. And at the same time, I think the kinds of sellers that are going to win the most are not just the ones that are able to send 1,000 personalized emails in 10 seconds, but the ones that when you hop on a call with them, you make them feel like you trust them and that they're deserving of your business. So those kinds of human skills are going to be an increased need, and I think a decreased supply as a lot of people start focusing more on the hard skills. I think the other big trend is I think a lot more companies are going to start leaning on automation for some of the maybe pre-screening, automatic qualification and disqualification, maybe recommendation of tools and services. I also think there's going to be a lot of, in the customer success and in those support areas, being able to automatically suggest, hey, here's where you are, here's where benchmark data suggests, here's what we recommend. I think kind of having those virtual assistants internally will help people find more success with the tools that I think is going to lead to larger renewals. Knock on wood, we'll see. It's so early, but I think the days of sellers spending hours and hours cleaning and when I was a sales development rep, I spent 30 minutes every single day at the end of my day cleaning up all of my notes and bolding them and italicizing and making it super easy to read. And that was the reason why I got promoted so quickly. It was because everyone's like, oh, David's notes are so easy to read. Hello, I could have saved hours and hours and thousands of dollars had I had AI be able to help me out with just formatting notes for my account executives. So I'm really excited to see where AI goes and trying to stay ahead of it, even though I know every time I take one step back, I feel like I'm 3 steps behind. So it's very humbling getting to be a part of this change.
For sure. Well, as we get to the closure of our conversation, and I know David and we can talk for hours, but when it comes to the future for you, David, what particular legacy or impact are you looking to leave in your professional endeavors?
It's so hard to think about. And I think there's a few things that I'm trying to think about in terms of the legacy. Everything that I'm trying to do on the professional side, I want to be a really good dad. I want to be a really good family man. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good son, a good friend. And so everything that I do, I want to make sure it doesn't come at the expense of those things first and foremost. Internally, I really want to be known as a really strong seller and someone who can understand, digest, incorporate, iterate, and scale feedback really quickly. Someone who can take in outside learnings, tweak what works and doesn't work based on real-time feedback, and then be able to share it in a way that's incredibly stealable and tactical. The kind of legacy I want to leave is I want to be someone that clients feel that they can trust. Internally, my peers feel that, aside from the fact that I eat tuna fish way too often, someone that they feel like they can lean on, that they want to learn from, that they want to continue working alongside, and I guess greater in the sales community. I'm hoping to be able to upskill other sellers. There's a lot of really bad sales advice out there, and I would love to be able to synthesize, sift through that so that really hungry sellers are not gaining the wrong information that I don't think is going to be the most effective, and that they're taking what they need in a way that matches the best way for it to stick with them and that people can reach their goals. Sales is an incredibly challenging industry, but at the end of the day, being a really effective seller, oh God, it would be so exciting just getting to help one seller go from being on a performance plan to crushing their number and going to their president's club. That would make it all worth it. So hopefully maybe one day as a manager, as a leader, I'll get to do that down the line. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to be the best damn seller possible. So that's me.
I love that. And thank you so much, David, for being on the Omega Podcast.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Keenan.